Okay, hi. My name is Sue Shapiro. I teach in the history department here at Utah State University, and I will be teaching the Bennion Teachers Workshop in Democratic Principles this summer. The title of the workshop is Athenian Democracy and Its Legacy. What can we learn about democracy from ancient Greece and Rome? And I'd just like to spend a few minutes in this video introducing the workshop and talking a little bit about what we're going to study. So first, let's talk about what is the Bennion Teachers Workshop. The Bennion Teachers Workshop in Democratic Principles was established in 1993 by a gift of Aone Bennion. And it's a one-week workshop for teachers in Utah to explore democratic principles. In particular, the purpose is to explore the concepts upon which democracy is built, the conditions under which it flourishes, and the dangers to its existence. Ione Spencer Bennion lived from 1908 to 1997. She taught at USU from the 1940s to the early 1950s, and she was the Dean of Women here from 1945 to 1952. In 1952, she was forced out of USU because of an anti-nepotism law that prevented women from teaching at USU if their husbands were also employed at USU. So after 1952, she taught in the Logan schools for the next 28 years. She started the Young Mothers Program, which helped teenage mothers complete their degrees. She helped to establish Planned Parenthood in Logan, and she helped to establish the Women's Center at USU. And she established the Bennion Teachers Workshop for the Perpetuation of Democratic Principles through a generous gift in 1993. And it's been held at USU every year since then. And it bears repeating. The purpose is to explore the concepts upon which democracy is built, the conditions under which it flourishes, and the dangers to its existence. Okay, so let's talk about what we'll be doing this summer. This summer we're going to focus on Athenian democracy, how it was established, what it was like, what are some of the great aspects about it, what are some of the not so great aspects about it. We'll also talk about how it influenced the Roman Republic, and then how both the Athenian democracy and the Roman Republic have influenced our own democratic republic. And as I say, we'll be looking at both the good and the bad. The dates are going to be Monday, June 12th to Friday, June 16th, and it will be held from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day here at USU. Now, people who enroll have a number of ways you can register. You can get between 1 and 3 graduate credits, or you can get between 1.5 and 4.5 continuing education units. And within each of these two main options, there's a range of registration options and costs. And I will get into that a little bit later. But first, I want to really talk a little more about what the content is of what we'll be doing. So here you can see it broken out by day. On Monday, we'll be looking at the Archaic Greek Polis, or city-state. On Tuesday, we'll focus in on the Athenian democracy and the Peloponnesian War. On Wednesday, we'll focus on Socrates, and we're going to reenact the trial of Socrates. On Thursday, we're going to focus on the Roman Republic, and we'll have a guest lecturer, Dr. Darrell Phillips. And on Friday, we'll tie it all together, talk in general about what we've studied all week, the legacy of Greece and Rome, and how that influences our government today. So I want to go individually through each day and talk about each day in a little more detail. So the first day on Monday, we'll look at the Archaic Greek Polis. Polis is a Greek word, and it means a self-governing city-state. So we'll really focus on what is the polis, what does self-government mean, why is it needed, and we'll look at a range of types of government for Greek polis, or city-states. We're going to read the Iliad books 1 and 2, and we'll look particularly at the political dynamics. The Iliad was composed really at the time when the Polis itself was developing, and I think we can learn a lot about what the Polis meant through the political dynamics in the first 2 books of the Iliad. Then we'll look at early Greek history, how the self-governing Polis developed, and then we'll focus particularly on Athens and the early democracy, particularly 3 leaders, Solon, Pisistratus, and Cleisthenes. And then we'll look at Sparta. Sparta was much more conservative. It was an aristocracy, not a democracy, yet it was still a self-governing city-state. So between Athens and Sparta, we get the whole range from a democracy to an aristocracy. Then on Tuesday, we'll focus really deeply on Athenian democracy and the Peloponnesian War. Peloponnesian War lasted for about 30 years. It was the last third of the 5th century BC, and it was almost like a world war between Athens and her allies and Sparta and her allies. So we'll look at that. It was really 2 different ways of life. But also the same period, believe it or not, was also the high point of Athenian democracy. So we'll look at both of those things. And in particular, we're going to read Thucydides. He is one of the greatest historians from the ancient world. He was Athenian. He lived through the Peloponnesian War. In fact, he was a general in it. And he has a lot to say, both positive and negative, about Athens and its role in the Peloponnesian War. So we'll look at Pericles and his war strategy. We'll look at Athenian imperialism, both the good side and the bad side. And some of the topics in Thucydides that we'll read about, we'll read Pericles' funeral oration, we'll read his description of the Athenian plague, the Corcyraean Revolution, and the Melian Dialogue. And finally, on Tuesday, we'll look at some democratic buildings on the Athenian Acropolis and the Agora. What were the buildings in which these democratic processes took place? Then on Wednesday, we'll focus on Socrates, and particularly the trial of Socrates. So we'll look at who he was, what was his philosophy, why did the Athenians put him on trial? Both Plato and Xenophon, both philosophers, were students of Socrates, and they each wrote apologies. Now, the Greek word apology means defense. It's not an apology in our sense of the word. So both Plato and Xenophon wrote a defense speech for Socrates, and we'll be reading both of those and discussing the kinds of things that Socrates stood for. And we'll also look at some modern discussions of why Socrates was tried. In the afternoon, we're going to actually reenact Socrates' trial. We're going to divide up into 3 groups. One will be Socrates and his defenders, one will be Socrates' accusers, and one will be the jurors. The defenders and the accusers will make their own speeches, and then the jurors get to vote for Socrates' guilt or innocence. Then on Thursday, we're going to focus on the Roman Republic. We'll have a guest lecture by Professor Darrell Phillips. He will also give a keynote address on Tuesday night, by the way. And he is going to focus on the establishment of the Roman Republic, how it was influenced by Greek self-government, and we'll see that it was influenced more by Sparta than by Athens. We'll talk about Roman procedures of self-government, whether Rome was an oligarchy or a true republic, and there's a lot to be said on both sides. We'll look at their voting processes, their assembling, how the different assemblies that they had, and finally we'll look at the places and spaces of self-government in Rome. We'll look carefully at the Roman Forum, what kind of buildings they had, and then some of the major buildings, Republican buildings throughout Rome. Then finally on Friday, we're going to tie everything together and look at the legacy of Greece and Rome today. There's a film from 2019 called What is Democracy? that I think we'll see the film, and it'll give us a lot to talk about. One of the things in the film, and we'll do some reading about this too, in the early Renaissance in northern Italy, there were a number of cities who founded republics, and they were very, very intentionally built on the institutions of the Roman Republic. They were very self-consciously trying to imitate the Roman Republic. So we're going to look at those. They were in the early part of the Renaissance, in the 1100s, 1200s, and we'll focus particularly on Siena. We'll do some reading on it, and the film will talk about that too. And then in general, we'll just think about the principles of self-government in Greece and Rome, everything we've talked about, and how we can use that to help us solve some of the problems in our democracy today. So that's pretty much the topics that will be covered. You probably are interested to know how will each day be structured. So you can see here the structure of the days, and most of our days will follow this structure, except for Wednesday, when we're going to reenact the trial of Socrates. So you can see here, it will go from 9 to 5, so it's pretty intense, but I have put every other session, there'll be a lecture and discussion followed by a reading period. Then another lecture and discussion followed by lunch, then another lecture and discussion, and then another reading period. So you might be wondering, well, why have I done it this way? Basically for two reasons. The lectures and discussions are going to be fairly intense, so I want to have some quiet time, some reading and reflection time in between to give us a time to relax. Also, there is going to be quite a bit of reading. Now, some of it you're going to do before the workshop starts. I'll be giving you some reading assignments to do beforehand. But while the workshop's going on, it's going to be fairly intense. You're really not going to want to do any reading at night. You're going to want to relax, maybe socialize, just do nothing. You're not going to want to do a lot of reading at night. So I have 2 reading periods during the day for you to have some quiet time and also catch up on your reading. Okay, let's talk a little bit about registration options. It can be a bit confusing. So there's 2 main options. You can get graduate credit or you can get continuing education units. For graduate credit, you can choose 1, 2, or 3 credits. These are real graduate credits. They count toward a master's degree here at USU. You can get them in history, English, or education. If you're thinking about coming to USU for a master's degree, this would be an excellent way to get started. If you opt for the graduate credit, yes, there will be more reading. There will be more written assignments because you'll be getting graduate credit. They're not going to be onerous. They won't be burdensome. I will make them interesting. Also, graduate credit will cost you more, and I'll get into that in a minute. But there will be some scholarships. Some of you may not want graduate credit. I know many of you who are thinking about this workshop already have a master's degree. You don't need 2 master's degrees. Or some of you may just not be interested in a formal graduate degree. So you can do sign up for continuing education units between 1.5 and 4.5. It doesn't count toward a degree, but there's less reading, there's fewer written assignments, and it costs a lot less. Okay, so let's talk about cost. These dollar amounts are from last year, so they may not be exact for this year, but I think they'll be close. If you go for graduate credit, you'll be paying for 1 to 3 credits at the going rate. So last year that was from $1,000 to $1,700. However, we will have 3 to 4 scholarships of $500 each for those of you who take this option. If, on the other hand, you just want the continuing education units, it's going to be a lot less. It's $30 per CEU. So depending on how many of those you want, that is what it will cost, much, much less. However, if you do go for the CEUs, you will not be eligible for a tuition scholarship. Okay, what does the tuition cover? Obviously, it covers all of the instruction, 9 to 5 every day. It does also cover the keynote address. It also includes a continental breakfast every day. It includes lunch every day, snacks every afternoon, and 2 dinners. We'll be having a group dinner Sunday night and Wednesday night. So it includes all of that in addition to the instruction. But there are some other costs. So if you live outside of Cache Valley, you'll probably want to stay in a hotel. We have a lovely hotel right here on campus. It'll cost you about $500 for the week, but we do have 2 or 3 scholarships for teachers living outside of Cache Valley who want to come here. Most dinners you'll have to pay for on your own. You'll have to pay for your books. It'll cost around $100. Parking on campus for the week will be about $20, and of course, any incidentals. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the range of costs. The main cost will be tuition. Okay, things to keep in mind. There will be some reading before the workshop. There will be some reading during the workshop. As I say, I don't expect you to read at night. We'll be having 2 reading periods during the day. I want to point out that there's no exams. You will not be tested. There are no exams. So what happens if you don't do some of the reading? It means that you won't be able to participate in the lecture and discussion as fully as if you had done the reading. But, there's no cost to you. You won't be marked down if you don't do the reading. It's really all for your educational benefit. I am going to ask you to keep a daily journal where you make notes on your reading and then your personal reactions. Did you like something? Did you dislike it? Did you have trouble with something? Did you have a strong opinion about it? Did you think one way about the reading, but then after the class discussion you felt a different way? So those are the things I'm going to ask you to write in your journal, and I will ask you to hand that in. Those of you who are going to take the class for graduate credit, I'm going to ask you to do lesson plans or maybe a seminar paper, depending on your choice. So there's going to be it's a small workshop, so I will be able to help you tailor a plan of assignments to fit your needs. If you want to do lesson plans, we'll set you up to do lesson plans. If you're more interested in a typical graduate seminar paper, I'll work with you on that. But I'll be able to tailor your assignments to your own interests and needs. And so finally, we want to ask, who is this for? Really, it's for anyone who wants to learn more about ancient Greece and Rome. We're going to focus on history, government, politics, literature, and public architecture. So if those subjects interest you, if you're interested in Greece and Rome, I think you'd really enjoy this workshop. If you're already teaching ancient history, if you're already teaching Latin, and you want to get more of a background, I think this workshop is for you. Also, if you're interested in doing some graduate level work in a fun, friendly, and non-judgmental environment, I think this is a good place to start. And finally, anyone who wants an intense learning experience, the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, will be intense, but it will also be short and sweet. It will take only 1 week of your summer vacation, and after that you'll have the rest of the summer to relax and enjoy. So I will leave you with a recent photograph of the Parthenon on the Athenian Acropolis with a beautiful Athenian olive tree in the foreground. Thank you for listening to this video. If you have any questions at all, please shoot me an email. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And thank you very much.